Hey, good morning. Chicago police tell us a Maywood woman is now facing charges of murder and vehicular hijacking after she allegedly hit and killed an Uber Eats driver near Loretto Hospital. Police tell us this woman here, 33-year-old Montoya Perry, was arrested after 10 hours after she stole an Uber Eats driver's car and hit him before taking off. That Uber Eats driver was Daniel Figueroa, a 28-year-old man from Downers Grove. He was found unresponsive just after 2 a.m. on Monday near Flournoy Street in the South Austin neighborhood. He was taken to Mount Sinai Hospital where he was pronounced dead.
Let me tell you about a man named Daniel Figueroa. Daniel was 28 years old. He lived in the Chicago area, and by almost every measure, he was doing what a good man is supposed to do. He was working. He was providing. He was showing up every single day, not because life was easy, but because people were depending on him. He had a partner named Sandra Guerrero. Together, they were raising a young boy in their home. The child was Sandra's son biologically, but Daniel never made that distinction. To him, that boy was his. Full stop. And that alone tells you a lot about the kind of person Daniel was. His primary job was at an Amazon warehouse. If you have ever worked warehouse, you know what that means. Long shifts. Sometimes overnight. Your body takes a beating. You are on your feet for hours, moving boxes, loading shipments, racing against productivity targets that never seem to slow down. Most people would come home after that, sit down, and call it a day. Daniel didn't. He drove for Uber Eats on top of his warehouse shifts. That was his second income. That was how he topped up what the warehouse paid, so the rent was covered, so there was food on the table, so his family had a little more breathing room than they did the week before. He was not chasing luxury. He was chasing stability. There is a difference. People who knew Daniel described him the same way, over and over again. Dependable. Consistent. The type of person who would help you move furniture on a Saturday and never ask for anything in return. He did not complain about working long hours. He did not look for shortcuts. His whole life was built around routine. Work, come home, be present for the people he loved. On weekends, when he actually got a moment to breathe, Daniel liked to go fishing. That was his peace. Just the water, the silence, and time away from the noise of everything else. It is important that you understand who this man was before we get to what happened to him. Because what happened to Daniel Figueroa was not random bad luck in some abstract sense. It happened to a specific person, a father figure, a partner, a hardworking young man, who was simply doing what he always did. On the night of February 23, 2026, Daniel finished his shift at the Amazon warehouse. He could have gone home. He was probably tired. His body had already put in hours of physical labor. But instead of heading back to Sandra and the boy, he opened his Uber Eats driver app and logged in for the night. He had deliveries to make. And one of those deliveries would be the last thing he ever did. The city of Chicago at 2 in the morning looks different from Chicago during the day. The streets are quieter. The traffic thins out. Most of the city has gone to bed. But there are pockets of the city that never sleep, hospitals being one of them. Doctors, nurses, technicians, they work through the night, and just like everyone else, they get hungry. That is exactly what happened on the night Daniel was working. A doctor inside Loretto Hospital, located on Chicago's west side, placed a food order through Uber Eats. The instructions were simple. Bring the food to the hospital entrance. Hand it to security. Standard procedure for a late-night delivery. Daniel accepted the order and drove toward the hospital. He was driving his blue Dodge Caravan minivan, the same vehicle he used for deliveries night after night. He knew the streets. He knew the routine. Pull up, drop off, move on to the next one. That was the job. That was how it worked. Around 2 o'clock in the morning, Daniel arrived outside Loretto Hospital. He parked on the street near the entrance. And here is something important, something that thousands of delivery drivers do every single night without thinking twice about it. He left the engine running. It is not laziness. It is not carelessness. When you are making a delivery that is going to take 2 minutes, you leave the car running. You are coming right back. You are not going anywhere. You just need to hand something off and get back behind the wheel. Daniel walked into the hospital. He handed the food to the security staff at the entrance, just like the instructions said. He turned around. He walked back outside. He had been inside for just a few minutes. But in those few minutes, Everything had changed on that street. While Daniel was inside, 3 people were walking along the road outside. Surveillance cameras near the hospital were rolling, recording everything. Those 3 people noticed the parked minivan. Engine running. No driver visible inside. And in that moment, a decision was made. One person opened the front passenger door. Another opened a rear door. And a 33-year-old woman named Montoya Perry sat herself down behind the wheel. Think about that for a second. Daniel had been inside that hospital for minutes, just long enough to hand over a food order. And by the time he stepped back outside into the cold Chicago air, strangers had already made themselves at home in his vehicle. He saw them. Right away, he saw them. And Daniel Figueroa, the man who never backed down from responsibility, ran toward his van. He did not run away. He did not stand on the sidewalk and watch it happen. He ran toward it because that van was his livelihood, his ability to work, his way of providing for his family. He ran toward it, and that decision would cost him everything. There are moments in life that happen so fast that by the time your brain processes what is going on, it is already too late to change the outcome. This was one of those moments. Daniel was running toward his van. Montoya Perry was already behind the wheel. The engine was running. Daniel had made sure of that himself, without knowing what was coming. And as he got close to the vehicle, Perry began pulling away from the curb. She drove forward. Daniel reached the van. He grabbed onto the passenger side door handle and held on. And here is where you have to stop and think about what was going through his mind in that second. This was not recklessness. This was a man watching his ability to provide for his family disappear down a Chicago street at 2 a.m. That van was everything, his income, his second job, the reason he could keep the lights on and food in the fridge. So he held on. The van kept moving. Perry did not stop. She accelerated. And Daniel was dragged alongside that moving vehicle down the street outside Loretto Hospital. Witness footage captured what happened. The blue Dodge Caravan moving through the night. A man clinging to the side of it. Half a block. That is how far he was dragged before he could no longer hold on. He fell to the pavement. And then, and this is the part that is hardest to sit with, the van kept going. As it moved forward, one of the tires struck Daniel. The vehicle did not stop after that. It did not slow down. It just kept going and left Daniel Figueroa lying on the street outside a Chicago hospital at 2 a.m. Alone. Think about how quiet that street must have been in that moment. The van was gone. The 3 people were gone. And a man who had just been working, a man who had been doing the right thing his entire adult life, was lying in the road with catastrophic injuries. He had not done anything wrong. He had parked his car to make a delivery. He had handed off a food order. He had walked back outside. And he had tried to stop someone from taking the thing he worked so hard to have. And it had cost him everything. Inside the hospital, the doctor who had placed the Uber Eats order started to notice something was wrong. The delivery had not been confirmed in the app. The order sat there, marked as pending, with the driver showing as nearby. The doctor walked to the entrance to check. What the doctor found outside was not a delivery driver waiting with food. It was Daniel on the ground. Blood on the pavement. And when the doctor pulled up the driver's profile in the Uber Eats app and called the number listed there, a phone began ringing somewhere close by. Emergency services were called immediately. Paramedics arrived. Daniel was transported to a hospital for treatment. But the injuries were too severe. Daniel Figueroa, 28 years old, a warehouse worker, an Uber Eats driver, a partner, a father figure, did not survive. The investigation moved quickly. Chicago police arrived at the scene and began pulling together every piece of evidence they could find. Surveillance footage from buildings near the hospital, traffic camera recordings, witness statements, digital data from the Uber Eats driver app itself. Every thread that could be followed, they followed. But the most important lead was the van itself. When Perry drove away from that hospital, she took Daniel's blue Dodge Caravan with her. And the license plate on that van was still attached. That was the detail that would unravel everything. The Chicago area is covered by a network of automated license plate reader cameras. These systems run constantly, scanning the plates of passing vehicles, logging the data, tracking movement across the city, without anyone having to watch a single screen in real time. Investigators fed Daniel's plate into the system and started tracing the path of that van through the city after it left Loretto Hospital. The trail led them to Maywood, Illinois, a suburb just outside Chicago. That is where the van was found, parked. Police set up surveillance near the vehicle and waited. Hours passed, and then Montoya Perry came back to the van. Officers moved in. Perry tried to run. She did not get far. She was taken into custody, and according to prosecutors, Perry later admitted to taking the van. She admitted that she saw Daniel running toward the vehicle as she drove away. She saw him. She kept going. Now let me tell you who Montoya Perry was, because this is a part of the story that is very hard to hear. Perry was 33 years old, from Maywood. But this was not her first encounter with the criminal justice system, not even close. Prosecutors revealed that Perry had 8 prior felony convictions stretching back to 2010. 8. In a span of roughly 15 years, she had been convicted of robbery, carjacking, forgery, fleeing from police, and providing false information to law enforcement. And here is the detail that will stay with you. At the time Daniel Figueroa died, Montoya Perry was already on pretrial release for a separate arrest that had happened just 2 weeks before. 2 weeks. She had been arrested for something else, released while awaiting trial, and 2 weeks later, she was on a street outside Loretto Hospital at 2 in the morning. After her arrest for Daniel's death, investigators also discovered a social media post connected to Perry. The post appeared to reference the stolen car and suggested that someone looking for a missing vehicle could come and get it. The post was later deleted. Prosecutors would cite it as evidence of indifference, that after Daniel Figueroa died on that pavement, someone thought the appropriate response was to make a social media post. The post was deleted, but it had already been seen, and it would follow Montoya Perry into that courtroom. When Montoya Perry appeared in court, the charges were serious. Felony murder, vehicular hijacking. The prosecutor laid out the facts of the case before the judge, the surveillance footage, the tracking data, the admission Perry had made after her arrest. The judge heard everything and made a decision. Perry would remain detained in jail while the case moved forward. She would not be released on bond. She would wait behind bars for whatever came next. But there was another moment in that courtroom, one that had nothing to do with legal arguments or evidence. Daniel's family was there. Perry's family was there. And the grief and the anger in that room reached a point that words alone could not contain. An argument broke out. Then a physical altercation. Deputies had to step in to restore order inside the courtroom. That is what grief looks like when it has nowhere else to go. The case is still moving through the system. Investigators believe 2 additional people were involved in the carjacking that night, the other individuals seen in that surveillance footage alongside Perry. At the time of this story, those 2 people had not been arrested. The search continues. But the person left most alone in all of this is not Montoya Perry sitting in a jail cell, and it is not the lawyers preparing their arguments, and it is not the investigators following leads on 2 more suspects. It is Sandra Guerrero. It is the woman who watched her partner leave for a warehouse shift and a few Uber Eats deliveries and never saw him come back through the door. It is the boy in that house who had a man willing to be his father and now does not. A fundraising campaign was launched to help the family cover expenses because the income Daniel provided did not disappear just because he did. The bills were still there. The rent was still there. The responsibilities were still there. But the man who had built his entire life around meeting those responsibilities was gone. Daniel Figueroa was 28 years old. He worked 2 jobs. He came home tired. He went fishing when he got the chance. He loved a woman and raised her son as his own. He was the kind of person who ran toward a problem instead of away from it, and on the night of February 23, 2026, that instinct, that reflex to protect the thing he had worked so hard to build, cost him his life on a street in Chicago. He did not deserve what happened to him, and the people who loved him will carry that truth for the rest of their lives, long after the trial is over, long after the verdict is read, long after everyone else has moved on to the next story. Some people leave a mark not because they were famous, but because they were faithful. Faithful to the people who needed them. Faithful to the work. Faithful to showing up, day after day, even when they were exhausted. That was Daniel Figueroa. And now his story belongs to all of us. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, comment, hit that like button, and turn on notifications for more crimes videos.